It's interesting maybe when we're talking about the framework of going up as well, Ben, when we kind of look at maybe Trafford and we look at Estev and we look at maybe Brownhill in there, and then you look at Sunderland and you look at maybe Trey Hume, Dennis Sirkin, and then maybe Leeds when you look at the likes of William Yonto and maybe Altanaka, players who can acclimatise to the Premier League, you feel anyway when you look at their attributes, etc. Do you think that some of the who do you think is probably best placed when it comes to the framework of going up this season? The players that maybe you feel could acclimatise with a bit of additions added toward the squad as well.
Well, you mentioned a few of them. Can I just quiz you as a Leeds fan? Who
Yeah, yeah.
would you put from Leeds in that? Ampadu,
Yeah, I'd probably say
Nonto?
I'd probably say we've maybe got six. Maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic there, but I would probably go Joe Rodon, who I think's been exceptional this season. I probably would say was a Premier League player. We'll wait and see on that one. But I would then go probably Ampadu, Tanaka, and then a little bit further forward, I still would say Nonto. I think he was one of our star players last time, and I don't think football's linear, Ben. I think you can be not as great in the Championship. That doesn't mean that you're going to be poor in the Premier
What
League.
a mind-blowing concept, Connor, hey?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I always say to people, it's like, look at Patrick Bamford, scored 15 goals in the Championship. Next season, he went to the Premier League, scored 17. So it's not always just because it's not quite worked for him in the Championship, it won't work in the Premier League. Liam Delap been another one,
There you go.
but yeah, and I would maybe say. Maybe I've still got a bit of a light burning for Larger Ramazani at some point. I know he's not been exposed as much to Championship football, but once again, that concept again that we've just spoken about. So I think there's maybe 4 or 5 Leeds players that can potentially acclimatise. I do look at Sunderland, and I think maybe there's. I'd really like Isidore. I think he's a perfect profile for the Premier League. Mayenda's interesting because towards the back end of the season,
Yeah.
could he
Lafay.
acclimatise? Yeah, could he? Yeah, exactly. Lafay as well, another one. So could they have 4 or 5? Burnley, I would say maybe need to do a little bit, but defensively, we'll have to wait and see what happens there, I guess. So yeah, there's a lot of conversation there in terms of who's maybe the best setup. I'd maybe just edge Leeds, just.
I've got two things to say. One is about the slow burn, and one is about physicality. Okay. The slow burn, which will irritate the hell out of all the promoted teams, is that Brentford, yes, Brentford, who no one even looked at 10 years ago, can sign Keane Lewis Potter from, where did they get him from?
Was it
Hull?
Hull?
Was it?
Hull,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can sign Keane Lewis Potter, one of the better players out of the Championship, and spend 3 seasons developing him very, very gradually, slipping him in, not putting him in a position where he's going to get completely overrun by, to mention the same players, Bukayo Saka or Bruno Fernandes or, whoever. Leeds, Burnley and Sunderland do not have the time scale to do that. So there are players, and you've mentioned most of the good examples, that if they were to go to one of the 17, would be very, very used. And I'm talking to a Leeds fan. Somerville, arguably best player in the league, certainly for times of the 23-24 season. And he goes to West Ham. And okay, you can be a sub, you can take your time. We'll develop you over 3 seasons and pay back then. So there's a time. It's almost unfair to judge the players on if they're doing it from a promoted team, whereas if they're doing it for the 17. And then I was particularly thinking about Tanaka when you were saying this. And I don't want this to be a patronizing thing because it always gets leveled at Asian players as well. So I'm not saying this particularly in terms of Tanaka before people pick me up on that. But when you watch Premier League teams, we found it immediately watching Ipswich that it's not just the technique. Premier League players are either incredibly good technically, incredibly good physically, or scary, ladies and gentlemen, both. And a lot of them, you're like, hang on a minute, he's 6 feet and he's got feet like that. And that's the difficulty as well, the sheer physicality of Premier League teams. And you look at them and when they do the lineup before the game, you're like, oh, God. Okay, if we can't out-technique these lot, I don't even fancy us in a fight here.
That's it. It's quite right. They've got to be, you got to bring players in that are physical and athletes as well. I think football's dramatically moved on, even since the last time Leeds were in the Premier League. I feel there was a phase of which there was small, diminutive players in and around football
Plain
teams.
Bale and Ronaldo,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
not only are you going to be a winger, but you look like a professional swimmer, and you haven't got an
yeah,
ounce of body fat on you, and you're 6 feet tall.
100%. I think sort of in the early noughties there was a period of it as well where it was like Vieira's, Zidane's, just massive football players. But I think then it went through a little bit of maybe a bit of a tiki taka phase where it was a little bit more based on the technical efficiency of football players. But I think and there still is that. But I think now they've been able to mesh what they have been, and you've kind of got this. Yeah, and it's obviously helped with nutrition and diet and all these things that we now know. You've now got these specimen footballers who, I mean, you even saw it the other night. I mean, I thought it was quite symptomatic watching the international game the other night with England and Senegal, where they were powerful, and the midfield carriers and all across the pitch they had quality. And I did think to myself, it's not going to be long before an African team gets in the final, and that's probably you
Oh, the
know
African lads have always had that thing, haven't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But now it feels like, that they are just complete when it comes to football players as
so
well.
good.
And that's why
Yeah.
we dip a lot of clubs, Premier League clubs are dipping into that market as well. So yeah, really interesting, mate, when it comes to profiles and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I guess unless you've got anything else you want to talk about, we've just kind of kiboshed all of their
No,
hopes now. All
well, that's what we don't want to
No, of course not.
do, because I think, regardless of me being an EFL pervert, an Ipswich Town fan who's also speaking to a Leeds fan, we're not just sitting here because of a vested interest in teams we support and leagues
No,
we've covered.
no.
It's really important for English football that this gets sorted out. That if you score 100 points in the Championship, and the idea is that you've got a very, very slim chance
Mm,
of even finishing out of the bottom three, let alone ninth. And it's only 4 years ago or whatever that Leeds finished ninth, and Sheffield United did the season before. And the fact that we're thinking that it's very, very difficult for that to happen again is a problem. And I genuinely really, really hope that someone does it. But Connor, the flip side of this is not only how hard is it for a promoted team to stay up, is how hard is it for one of the 17 to get relegated? Because at times last season, Everton were useless.
mm,
Palace were dreadful at the
mm.
start of the season. Wolves had like 6 months of complete nonsense, and then showed up at Ipswich with Brazil's 2 starting central midfielders on a 8-match undefeated streak, and were
Was it
streets
was
ahead
it
of
was
them.
it was it Andre and Gomez in that
Oh,
midfield? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
were incredible. And they
yeah.
were terrible for the first 6 months of the season. So we're almost Tottenham and Man United had their worst seasons
Yeah.
on for decades, and they're 20 points ahead of the relegated three. So it's not just about what they do. It's about it feels like you need a team in the 17 to have 4 managers, an
Mm.
injury crisis, the worst recruitment they can ever have,